Well, hello there. My name is Mark Miles, and I love helping trainers, presenters, workshop facilitators really take their results to the next level. And in today's video, I want to teach you something really, really cool that's going to take your presenting game in the online space to the next level. And that is essentially how to create massive engagement through using the chat box and making the chat box a huge part of your delivery. You see, when you're in the face to face environment, you can ask questions to the group and you can get people to put up their hand or do verbal responses and all these different things that you can take for granted in the online, in the face to face space. But when you are in the online space, it can be so much harder to get people actively involved because typically people are on mute, so to speak. And the bigger the group, the harder it is to get people to actively respond, either verbally or non-verbally, so to speak. But one of the greatest assets that you ever have as an online facilitator is that of the chat box. Now, the chat box is your greatest best friend if you're delivering online because you can get massive responses, massive engagement all of the time throughout your entire session. But it does take discipline and it does take effort to actually get people involved and using that chat box. You see, fundamentally, when you're delivering online, you have two choices. Number one, you can make it a boring experience for people, and by default, people check out and it becomes more of an infotainment experience. Or and in part of that, you show slides, and here's my slide. Or you can get people actively involved, learning throughout the session, contributing, and being part of the interactive experience. Now, the second choice is probably the direction that we all want to head. And whether you've been doing it or not up till now, you've probably seen great presenters out there doing it. And you may have wondered, how do they get all that engagement? And how do they get people responding and doing crazy things on the camera or into the chat box? So let's have a chat about that right now. So definitely get ready, grab a pen and get ready to write because we want to master that chat box. So the first thing you want to do is when you're starting out a session, you do want to get everybody familiar and knowing where that chat box is. So the first thing I suggest that you do is in the first minute or 2 minutes of your session, get people to put something into the chat box. It could be their first name, it could be their email address. You could say, all right, throughout today's session, I'm going to be sending you some documents. So could you put into the chat box the best email for me to send some information to? Now, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be how you feeling today, guys. It doesn't matter what it is, but within the first 2 or 3 minutes, you want people to get used to the idea that you will be getting people to put information into the chat box. It also teaches them where the chat box is and sets up the expectation that there will be an expectation that they contribute and need to give information, right? So essentially, it doesn't matter what it is, but just get them putting something in and set that expectation early. All right, next thing, you want to be asking questions throughout your session. And you can ask it like this. If you have ever done XYZ, type yes in the chat box. It could be. If you have ever had a difficult situation at work, maybe a bit of a conflict with a team member, type yes in the chat box. It could be if you've ever been to Paris, type yes in the chat box. It could be anything at all. But those closed questions, type yes in the chat box is a really powerful way to get everybody engaged and responding. Now, as part of that, though, and just like in the last point, you do need to set up an expectation that you will not move on. You will not move on as a presenter until everybody has responded in that chat box. Okay. So, as much as possible, you want to set up questions that do elicit a positive response and a response that everybody is going to give. Okay. Now, the next one, you can certainly say, does that make sense? And you can actually get everyone to say, yes, it makes sense. So everyone, if that makes sense, type makes sense into the chat box. All right. So you want to be getting people to respond whenever you ask a question. And typically great facilitators and presenters are always asking questions. But in the online environment, the way that you need people to respond, the best way to do it, get them doing it in the chat box. All right. Now, next one is If they have finished an activity or if they've just been doing something, you can tell them. If you are done on the activity, type done in the chat box. All right. That's a really simple strategy, but it really helps you know where everyone is at and how fast your group is traveling in the online activity or whatever you may be presenting. So, all right, everyone, I'm now going to ask you some questions. Go ahead, write down your answers. Once you're done, type done in the chat box. All right. Now, something so simple can be so powerful because they know that you are going to be there to support them and you're not going to go too far ahead of them. All right. Now, you can also say if you need more time, type more time in the chat box. Okay. Now, next one. This is one of the most critical. Highlighting key points. Highlighting key points. Now, what we mean by this is if you are talking on a topic, let's say you're talking about the importance of communication. So, communication is really, really important. And the response that you get from your communication will show you how successful you are as a communicator. Just so I know that you got that, type the word response into the chat box. Just so I know that you got that, type the word response into the chat box. Okay. So in that episode, in that example there, essentially what we can do is highlight key things that we want the audience to remember by telling them to write it in the chat box. So just so I know that you got that, type the letter E for engagement into the chat box. Or just so I know that you got that, type self-awareness into the chat box. Now, just a ninja tip here, just an idea. Don't make the word so long or so complicated or a word that's going to trick people up on their spelling, so to speak. All right, just make it simple. And you can say type X entire word in the chat box, or you can say just type a capital C or a capital E or whatever it may be. All right. So essentially, the more engagement you get in that chat box, the more your people, your audience are going to feel part of your session. And where presenters go wrong in the online space is that they think there's limitations on what you can actually do. But lo and behold, you can actually get people to do things in front of the camera, smile, wave, hands in the air. You can do that. You can get people to get massive interaction in the chat box. You can do breakout rooms and all those different things. But the number one skill you want to develop as an online presenter is that of getting responses in the chat box. And the more you do that, the more you're going to stand out as a masterful presenter and someone that really owns the online space. So on that note, hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this around because we really want to transform online delivery and get presenters out there really sharing their message in a way that interacts and gets people actively involved as part of the session, not just viewers of the session. Hope that's been valuable. Hope you got something from it. Like, comment, share, and let's get this message out there. Thanks for watching, guys.